Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Highly Unlikely with Josh and no Janae today, but with Josh and Janae. Janae's not able to be here because this podcast is being recorded during preparation for Unique Conference. So she is back to back in meetings and just working hard. So I get to have this one on my own, but it's with somebody that I know really well, a friend, and so it's easy. It'll be fun. Today, our guest is Pastor Corey Phillips, who is the pastor of our Garrison campus here at Evangel. Garrison is celebrating its 5th year anniversary. Coming up on, well, right now it's coming up, but on September 8th. And we're so excited for that campus and thankful for you and your wife, Brittany, and your family. For all you guys have invested over 5 years to make that campus go. It feels like yesterday.
It does. It's crazy. 5 years have gone by.
Yeah, it's really wild. So, Pastor Corey, tell everybody about your family.
So it's me and my wife, Brittany. We've been married 16 years.
16.
And we've got 2 kids, a 9-year-old little girl, Phoenix, which she'll be 10 at the time of this podcast comes out.
Nice.
And we got a 15-month-old Grayson. So a couple of miracle kids, a part of our story, which is great. It's weird raising 2 different, very aged kids. A 9-year-old and a newborn. It was like... It still just feels like 2 only kids because they're just so different, but it's fantastic.
God, you have a really good helper.
Yeah, that's right. Boy, she is mom, and she loves to carry him around and all that stuff. So
I love that.
It's fantastic.
That's so
Built-in babysitter.
Yeah, come on. Gotta stretch. Here's the question from the dish for today, Pastor Corey. How did you become close with your best friend?
Close with my best friend.
You can't pick your wife.
Oh, well, that was my answer.
I figured it would be. You can, if you wanna share a little bit of how you guys got to know each other, you can do that.
Are we gonna do that now, or do you want me to do that later?
You can do it now. That's okay.
Well, since you said not my wife, close to my best friend, we were youth pastors together, Pastor Dustin out in Watford City, and we have just made a point for years now to talk every single week. So we talk half an hour, 10 minutes, even if we're both busy, we still just connect and it's share life together. Sometimes it's really deep and meaningful, and we have great conversations just opening up about life. And sometimes it's like, hey, I went to the World Series because one of my youth kids was, playing baseball there, and they gave me a ticket, and I was like, this is amazing stuff. Like it's just sharing life together. So
that's awesome.
It was fun.
You know how I feel like I stay close with my best friends these days is Marco Polo. Do you ever use Marco Polo?
That's old.
It's old. And Janae and I resurrected it for a few key relationships in our lives. Like there's people that I just want to talk to. Why is the peanut gallery cheesing so hard? Okay, one of them uses it and one is judging us. No?
I just saw it pop up on her.
I am active on Marco Polo over the last month more than I've ever used Marco Polo in my life. So... But it's great because I don't get to talk to some of my friends very often, but we send Marco Polos, and I talk to them every day via Marco Polo. So
I have a crazy story about Marco Polo.
Let's hear it.
I'll keep it short. But so Pastor Cal Thompson, when we were at his funeral, I got an email that said, Pastor Cal sent you a Marco Polo. And it was like 1.5 years old.
No way.
And so on the way home, I got to watch it.
What?
And it was when we were planting Garrison, and he was just encouraging me about the season we were in and pushing forward and just get the building up, get the church going. And I was like, this is gold. So I screen recorded it, and I still have it. And I was like,
so awesome.
Thankful for Marco Polo.
That's the first thing I did too when he passed away was I went to all my voicemails I had and I recorded them. And saved them, downloaded them or whatever. So I just have them forever.
It's so cool to look back
That's
on.
really cool. See Marco Polo, people.
Still good.
It's not old, it's vintage. It's still got value. So tell us the story of your family moving up. We were just talking about it in staff meeting today, but moving up to Garrison, all you had was the promise of a part-time job at that point. And tell us about the transition up there, or just like living in a camper, waiting for, the house, like everything.
Yeah, everything.
As much as you want to share.
It was a crazy, crazy time because I was working full-time landscaping, and we were coming into the busy season, February, out of snow removal. And then this opportunity came about to come back on staff at Evangel and plant a campus, and nobody knew what that looked like because it was the first one. And so we're like, yeah, like we have always in our life had open hands. Like whatever God, we're yours. Like we're your tools. Do whatever you want. We'll go wherever. Which was really hard at first when we first became Christians, because we're like, no, this is our life. Let me protect it. And now we've just learned over the years, just open hands. God's plans are far better than ours.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, Garrison. I didn't even know where it was on a map. I remember telling the story. I was driving up north with Pastor Bryce to go to Garrison, and I was like, why aren't we going east? Because I thought Garrison was that way, because I thought the Garrison Dam was the McDowell Dam.
Nice.
So I was way off on my geography. But we got up there and met with all the people, and I just fell in love with just rural communities and the authenticity with it up there. And so we're like, we're all in. Like, we just feel God's hands all over this. And so we jumped in with like, yeah, part-time. We're like, all right, we'll work part-time landscaping, part-time this. And then we're like, well, we need to move up there because we need to find a building. We need to remodel that building, and we're going to launch a church.
Yeah.
So we just quit our other job and packed everything up. My wife quit her job, and we moved up there, and we had a house from a family in church that were selling it. And we thought, okay, like we can't get in it quite yet because they have to have an estate sale. And so we called a campground, and they had a camper available, and we moved into a camper in, I think it was February or March, and working part-time down here, and just said, all right, Lord, we're here. Open hands. Like we've come this far. We trust in you with the rest of it. And so we then worked and rallied volunteers to come, and we remodeled that whole building in like a month and a half, I think it was.
Oh, I remember leading up to the first Sunday, and it was like there
goodness.
was no carpet. There's all this stuff that was not done.
I remember getting a text from you that like 2 days before we launched, and you were like, or do we want to move this back a week?
Is this happening?
Yeah. I was like, we're going. Like, carpet's going down right now, the Saturday night before we launched.
It is insane.
Yeah. But it's just constantly open hands, Lord. We're just trusting you with everything.
Yeah. You sent me a text earlier that talked about like a burn the bones moment, or, biblically burn the oxen, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Butcher the oxen, of just like no turning back. We're all in, and that's totally what you guys did, in jumping in and moving up there, and now pastoring that campus for 5 years. But I want to fast forward, because what I really want to get to today is the story of what God is doing in your lives now.
Yeah. And
so earlier this summer, we both ended up at kids camp, which is just a divine appointment, maybe, because I don't go to kids camp, but it just so happened that I was there and you were helping out with something. And we had a conversation just about being open-handed and like where your passion was and what was going on in your life. And you had an interesting conversation, I think, while you're at camp. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
Yeah. So being at kids camp and just feeling God doing something, stirring something in our hearts. And I wasn't sure what it was at all. I was like, I felt this before, but I don't know what it is. And so we were just open hands, like, Lord, whatever you want to do. And so it's like, it was during one of just the quick leader meeting we had at camp. And I was like, I was getting sweaty and clammy. I was like, I need to go talk to Pastor Josh because something's going on here.
Yeah.
And I didn't listen to the meeting at all. I was just anxious. And I was like, I have to catch him. I have to talk to him about this. And we talked for 15, 20 minutes. And I was just like, okay, I left like, deep breath. Like, I don't know what God is doing. And I walked up to our camper that we had borrowed from a friend to be at kids camp. And I met this guy that was camping across from us, and they're RV volunteers. And I was like, well, what is that? And he said, we just travel the country, and God provides for us, and we help churches with their building projects, and we help with district camp projects and all these different things. And I was like, my heart like leaped for a minute. And I was like, that's what we wanted to do, but we'd always planned to do it when we retire, because we have a thick background in construction. And so we'd been through.
And you had just literally gotten back from being in Alaska, helping to build the church in Bethel too. So you'd just been doing this with your own hands.
It was so fresh in our hearts. And I was still processing Alaska, because it was like we were home a week and then immediately went to camp. And so I remember being in Alaska talking with the missionary there, and he was just like, man, you're really good at this stuff, and you know what you're doing, and you're a pastor. And I was like, what's that supposed to mean? He's like, you should be doing this. I was like, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do when we retire. This is our retirement plan, to do this and travel. can't do it with kids. You get school and all this stuff. And so we're talking to this family, and they're in this like small little motorhome, and they're living at camp all summer, helping out, building new bathrooms, running kitchen, doing projects. And there's like, they got 4 or 5 kids in this camper, and it's him and his wife, and they were our age. And we were like, you can do this? Like, this is life. And they're like, yeah, we love it. We burned the boats, sold everything they had, their business they owned, and just jumped in, and we're just trusting God with everything. And he was just laying out just open hands constantly. And they were just constantly following what he was doing. And I was just like, and so that night I got on my phone and went to the church mobilization page through the Assemblies of God. And it was RV volunteers and missionaries, and clicked the more information button thinking, oh, it's, one of those hello@churchmobilization.org emails or something. I was like, I'll just get a generic response back, but I wanted some more information what it was. And I get an email back from the director of the whole program. And he was like, hey, got your email. It got forwarded to me. Tell me your story. So I just laid out our history of when we got saved, and construction and building project that we've been a part of after building project after building project. And he just immediately emailed me back, we need to talk. And I thought I was in trouble. Yeah. I was like, oh gosh, what did I do?
Working out.
Yeah. And he's like, here's my cell phone number. So I text him, and he set up a time, and we chatted, and he said, I'm looking for an RV missionary over North and South Dakota. And I felt that same stirring in my heart, like, oh my goodness, like God, this ball I feel like has been moving now, and I'm trying to play catch up with it. And it's happening really fast. And I was just like, I got nervous, like, again, like, oh my goodness, like, I don't want to transition again. We love our hometown. We weren't looking for another job. We love working with Evangel and Garrison, and it's just incredible. We've made friends, and my kids made friends, and it's just, what do we do? And I don't want to do this, Lord, but open hands, like, Lord, whatever you want to do, here we are. And so we chatted, and he was looking for somebody, and then like, all right, are we going to do this? And my wife's like, I think so. I feel like God's speaking to us to do this. And so that's when then we had a conversation, and essentially it's being a missionary, so raising your own funds, and then traveling just North and South Dakota districts, networks, and helping rural churches, any church, build buildings, projects, remodels, their parsonages, adult teen challenge, district camps. And we were like, this would be a dream come true, like helping churches with their building projects, building relationships, and then going to the next one. It's an ADDer's dream. So I was super excited, like just like constantly moving and doing projects, plus having the adventure of a lifetime with our family, getting to travel. And there's so much more to the story with just even materialism. Like, oh my goodness, we didn't know that we were living in sin in that sense of just materialism, collecting things, hobbies. I'm an all-in person. And so it's like, if I found a hobby I liked, I was all in. I bought everything for it. And we were just like, man, this is so freeing. Just being able to say, we're going to live in a truck, in a trailer, and travel and enjoy life to the fullest.
Yeah. How did you and Brittany, I mean, you talked about like being kind of feeling a stirring, and then God brought that key conversation to you from the guy who was in the RV next to you. And then you guys obviously talked about it, prayed about it, thought about it. What was that conversation like for you? How did you guys discern like this is God or this isn't God? Like, did you do a pro con list? Did you like hear from the Lord? I mean, just help other people who are maybe thinking like, oh, maybe God is directing me or speaking to me. What is that? How does that go? What did it
there
look
was
like?
A couple things that we had talked about specifically. One being, I've always I've always prayed like, God, why have you given me so many talents with my hands, and you've called me to ministry from a pulpit? And I've just asked that question a lot because I feel like it's not wasting my talents, but I feel like, God, you've clearly gifted me in this. What am I supposed to do with this?
Like you're leaving something on the table almost. Yeah,
exactly. And so I didn't know it would be for a time such as this that we would come back to it. But I thought, we're going to be in full-time ministry. That was prophesied over us when we first got saved, and this is what we're supposed to do. And I didn't realize there was other opportunities in ministry to serve. But looking back at all of God's faithful steps across our entire marriage, of everything that was spoken over us, every project we were a part of, every relationship we've built. Like God was leading us up to this moment and just looking back at his faithfulness. And we look back through our journals of prayer requests and things spoken, and we were like, look how God moved here for this. Look how God moved here for this. And we never thought of that before. And it was one of those moments. And the other thing was just, it gets emotional thinking about all of it, because it's such a powerful thing when God moves in such ways. But we had looked back and just thought, God positioning us with where we've been and where we are today, it was so eye-opening to what he was doing in that moment. But then I had mentioned, like, we weren't looking at all. Like God brought this before us, but then the peace that came with that, it, like, we were nervous, but that's our, flesh of just going like, I have a stable job. We're here working at, the best church. And it was like, oh man, like, do we really want to leave this? But the peace that came with just seeking God through that, we were like, we know this is the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, cause we don't want to leave, but we just know this is what we're supposed to do. So it comes back to just open hands, God, like what you're calling us to do. And I've never felt a peace like that before, of just like, hey, I've put this before you, if you'll just trust me. And we were like, okay, like we just let it all go and let God. Like that's what we were just praying. And so knowing that peace that came with it was huge for us. So just like, we're going to take this step in faith, and there's peace with that right now. There's questions, and we don't have answers for everything.
It's a long road for you guys yet. Yep.
Completely. And so this is the very beginning process of all of this, but just knowing there's peace through it all, we know it's God.
Yeah. That's how I felt too, because and the other thing I appreciate is that you were quick to obey. I mean, it was like, you're quick to obey, because I got back from kids camp, took part of our team on a leadership retreat that following Monday, Tuesday. And I think you called me Tuesday night or Wednesday afternoon. I can't remember which day it was. And I could hear it in your voice.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, this is not, hey, we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
This is like, hey, this opportunity came up and this is it. And I could just hear it in your voice. It's like when somebody has a passion and an excitement that meets with their talents and their skills, it just brings them alive. And I just remember such like closure in that first phone call, because the conversation that we had before, where you were kind of feeling like a stirring and uneasy and not really sure what God was doing. And then to that conversation, it was like, oh, this is totally just a different tone.
Yeah.
And I could just tell that something inside of you had clicked.
Oh, big time.
And then I remember asking you on the phone, I told the staff this today, but I was like, so is this like a, hey, I'm letting you know so we can talk about it? Or like, hey, this is probably happening, so you need to prepare. And you're like, no, I think this is happening, And I just appreciated that like obedience, and that just how honest you were in the whole process. And honestly, just like on how you were open-handed with the Lord and totally submitted to us as leaders and what we felt like had needed to happen next. And it's just made it so easy, to embrace it. And it's made us excited to like rally around you guys and support you. Yeah. And the team is excited. So we've also been talking, I've heard myself more and more in the past couple of months when I'm preaching, talk about being a sending church, and missions isn't dead. God still is calling people to go to missions, and you say that stuff and you're like, oh, maybe this person or that, you never think it's going to be like one of your campus pastors that, feels that call. But it's for me, it was just very confirming of what I feel like God is doing in our church, and so to talk a little bit about the future, because I know there's people who maybe are hearing this podcast, didn't even know that all this was happening with you. And
we didn't. Or we didn't know that there was even opportunity like this available.
Right. Yeah. And we've actually been having strategic conversations of how do we equip people to go to the mission field, like to be in missions, because it just doesn't get talked about that much anymore. But you guys have a road ahead of you now, and the Garrison campus has a road ahead of you. And I know we've talked about hey, this can go as quick or as long as it needs to. You know, you've given us the reassurance of I'll stay and help out like through the end of the year if there's not another person. But also if there's another person, I'll help raise them up and step away and work another job until my training and everything is complete. And so we don't know how that's going to look. You know, you don't know how that's going to look.
Nope.
We're just kind of like waiting and seeing.
Trusting.
And trusting. Yeah. You still you'll be approved as a missionary. And then you'll go to training in the spring.
That's in the spring.
And then you'll start support raising sometime in the spring.
We have
as
about
well,
a year to fully fund get fully funded. So, and then we'll hit the mission field.
But Lord willing, you're on the mission field soon.
Sooner. I'd love to be next summer, next fall. And
that doesn't take a whole year.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't, but it's in the Lord's hands.
Yeah. Do you know what the goals are yet?
I don't know.
Support raising goals not there yet.
No.
Okay. Well, we'll update the church and, you know, and as we get more information.
It'll be great.
What are you looking forward to the most?
Really is being more intentional with family. I'm really looking forward to that. Brittany too is to just, I mean, we're going to be living in a trailer, you know, with our family and not having attachments to things. And so it's like, we're going to take every opportunity to see a new site and new adventures and build relationships with people. I'm excited for my kids to be raised in that setting to, I mean, go to different churches while they're, you know, we're doing all of this and support that church and love that church and sit in the front row with raised hands and just lead in that capacity and really encourage the churches while we're literally building the church and just allowing my kids to experience that just different. Like, I mean, imagine being a kid and experiencing all that. And then you get to 18 and you're like, I've been everywhere. I've seen everything. And it's, you really just have an appreciation. So we're most looking forward to that. We already have been homeschooling our entire kid's life. And so we've got that down to a T, and we're excited to almost put like the rubber to the road in that sense of things they're learning in history, and we'll be able to see those kinds of sites, but really investing heavily in our kids. Just living that sacrificial life of like, we chose to be parents and we're going to lay down our own selfish desires of our hobbies and the things we like to do to fully invest in our kids because we want them to love Jesus and not hate the church when they get older.
Right.
Man.
So the schedule, you kind of talked about it a little bit. So RV missions used to be called what?
Maps.
So some people, if you're real familiar with
it's going
AG
back.
in days gone by, you know it as
The
Maps.
red vests.
With the red vests and the patches. But now RV, you're an RV missionary, but it's RV volunteers, right?
So there's still those two categories. A couple years ago, they revamped the program, and there's RV missionaries now. And their goal was to really get a missionary over every district in the United States. Some of us, like North Dakota, South Dakota, they're just putting those two together. And so that's the part, you raise all your own funds and you travel and organize the volunteer side of it. So RV Volunteers, formerly MAPS, is retired people that have a passion and skills and buy an RV and travel, and you get to pick projects from a list, and you can do as much as you want or as little as you want. If you wanted to go south for the winter out of North Dakota and work on some projects down there, you can. And so we will specifically be over North, South Dakota to those churches and organizing the RV volunteers and really bringing awareness. The more people I've talked to about this, even our own family, they're like, well, we'll buy an RV and
I know. I was like, how many of your family members are going? Like,
pretty much all of us.
I can see your parents or in-laws.
Yep, exactly. They're like, we'll do it. We'll buy an RV and come help you on a project sometime, especially in winter.
Yeah.
Like, we'll go to Texas, Arizona, wherever it is you're going to end up, you know, because in the winter we have to go south. It's hard to live in an RV in January, February. You just frozen pipes and all of that. So we would just go south, work on some projects, and come back in the spring for that. But that's going to be just bringing awareness to that, because I know there's so many churches that don't even know that opportunity is available. Like, we're going to provide free labor for your project you're doing. Obviously, it can't be on a huge grand scale. We just don't have the capacity to do it. But hey, you need a parsonage that needs remodel and you can't afford it. You buy the materials. We will show up and facilitate and organize everything. Or even on evangelist capacity, where it's you just need somebody on site to coordinate with, because that's hard. I've talked to a couple other pastors that are planting campuses, and they have to travel 2-3 hours to the campus. Well, that takes time away from you studying and preparing a message and leading your staff team. And so just be able to provide that hands-on communication, somebody there on site they can trust.
Do you have any idea how many people in specifically North Dakota and South Dakota are doing this?
I have no idea on the volunteer side, but I know it's not very many at all.
Yeah.
And so our goal is really to help build that more and more.
Yeah. So parsonages, churches, campuses, campgrounds,
Teen Challenge.
Yep. That's awesome.
Colleges. That's the other big one. There's a lot of work at Trinity to do. And so we're excited to be going there and help out there.
Yeah.
It's
what, maybe there's people from Garrison that are listening and, no matter what the future looks like, they love you, they feel attached to you. Do you just want to talk for a minute, like to them, or just talk about your time in Garrison and your experience there and like what it has been to you guys?
It has been the most encouraging and loving season of our life. We have never felt so blessed being in Garrison and the people there in the church and the community just welcoming with open arms. And I had a gentleman the other day, we were at midweek, and he came up to me and he just said, he's in his early 70s. Pastor, I just have to thank you so much for putting so much effort to love people in this community. And he started tearing up a little bit. And I'm going, I respect you so much. And this is a huge honor of what you're saying to me right now. And he just loved me and appreciated me. And he's like, it has been incredible. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, we're leaving, you know?
Yeah.
But that encouraging just attitude is incredible. And people rally together in rural communities and they love their pastors. And I'm going to miss that. But I'm also, like I said, it's the most encouraging season we've been in our life of just the people in the church, just, hey, thank you. Thank you. And they're so supportive and I love them so much. And it's literally become home for us. Like this is our home now. And when we come back, it's like, we're going to stay in Garrison to visit. And it's one of these things, like it will always just forever be our home. Like, this is where we want to come back to. And obviously my parents are staying, my in-laws are staying, and it's just family's going to be there. And we are excited for the next pastor to come in because I know they're going to love him. And it's hard to transition, but it's like we talked about a little bit ago, where God calls somebody to do something, he's already preparing the heart of the next person to come in.
Opportunity to somebody else.
Yeah, and so the next person's going to step in and be great. And my prayer through all this 21 days of prayer and fasting, my wife's prayer has been, prepare the heart of the next leader to come in here, and they will take that church to the next level that we could never get to. And we talked about that at camp. Like maybe God's just moving you in a sense of, hey, He's moving you to the next thing he has for you. And there's the next person to take the church to the next level. Yeah. And I remember feeling that when we were building the actual remodeling the whole building of like, I would love to be like Paul and just establish a church. Hey, here you go. And hand it off to the next pastor and go to the next plant and go to the next plant. And so that's what we feel like God has now brought us into that season is even through remodels, just bring life to that church and a fresh, just look and go to the next one and just be like Paul in that sense and just missionaries in that way.
Yeah, we talked to our staff team. You and I have had this conversation about just you can be in a role and it's not like there's nothing going wrong. You're not unhappy. You're not looking. Yeah. But you feel something move. You know, like what you're talking about. And from that initial conversation that we had, and we call that, like we refer to that as the grace lifting. Yep. Like the grace to do this job God has put you in and you've been allowed to do. That sometimes that grace just lifts and it moves, like the Old Testament, the pillar of fire, you know, just starts to move and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to follow that. I'm not supposed to follow the security of this job. I'm not supposed to follow the, you know, desires of my own heart. I'm not supposed to follow comfort. I'm supposed to follow that. And I think that's what you're sensing.
Very much so.
And a lot of times I've seen, like with our staff team, people don't know how to give voice to that, you know, and I don't even think you knew how to give voice to it.
No.
In fact, it kind of came across a little bit more like fear of like, you didn't know what was going on.
So.
But we celebrate that because I would rather have people that follow God in obedience rather than overstay really in disobedience to the
Yeah.
Lord, you know?
Yeah.
So I know at a lot of churches and places, like, the number one thing that's celebrated is longevity, you know?
Mhm.
And that's kind of a generational thing. Like, if you stay at the car dealership for 40 years, you get a gold
Yeah.
watch kind of
Yeah.
thing, you know? But I think it's just, and we certainly celebrate longevity,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, big
And
time.
I've been here long enough that I can't really preach against that, you know? Like, I'd be speaking against myself, because I think for us, it's been 13 or 14 years now, you
Mhm.
know? And you've been a part of that journey,
Yeah, 10 years.
like, pretty much the whole time, though. I
Yeah.
think we moved to Bismarck not too far apart from each other. And so I just wanted, like, even people to understand that, because sometimes people look at transition in the church and think it must be bad, you know, or they feel abandoned when a pastor leaves.
Yeah.
It happens with youth a lot. Like, you see youth pastors move on, not just here, but anywhere.
Right.
It's kind of a staple of the church, and it creates instability. And sometimes that can be scary, but even more than celebrating longevity, we want to be people who celebrate obedience.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what the Lord has called us to, is to be obedient.
Yep.
You know, to where he leads us. And it's scary for somebody like me to even say that, because I'm like, I don't want a whole bunch of people getting obedient around here. You know? But I mean, even when we had our initial conversation, it's this for me too. It was just like, hey, open hands. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on in him. I don't know where this is going. I don't know how this is going to look, you know, but that's where you're talking about, like, there's a peace that you say,
Yeah.
I know God's calling me to follow in his grace,
Mhm.
and that leads to a good place. You know, I didn't even mean for that to rhyme.
That
but
was
it did.
great.
So
Did you write
somebody-
that down, like,
so-
in your mind?
No, somebody put that on X. Make sure it's out there.
There was about obedience. There was a line in a message a couple weeks ago, and I had the pleasure of always just preaching your messages,
Mm-hmm.
which is great.
See, and this is the worst, is I write stuff and then God moves people and they're like, it's because you preached
You
it. And I'm like,
preached
well,
it.
that's not what I meant. No.
But you said, and I'm preaching it, and I'm having this whole transition in my heart, and it was delayed obedience. It was either sin or disobedience.
It's disobedience,
It's
yeah.
disobedience. And I'm preaching that, and I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful we didn't delay on this,
Mm-hmm.
because what you said earlier, it was just like, Corey, you were so obedient right off the bat. And
Mm-hmm.
that took time in our relationship with Christ to learn that.
Yeah.
I remember when we first got saved and we came to visit North Dakota in 2010. It was summer of 2010. And we felt God like, hey, you need to move to North Dakota. And I was like, okay, that would be fun. But
You're like, that can't be the Lord.
yeah,
New
it was
channel.
pretty much like, no, we're heavily involved in our church here and it's going great. And a big part for us was my parents. I didn't grow up Christian, and my parents had just started coming to church. And so I didn't want to leave that and abandon what God was doing there.
Yeah.
And so I was disobeying what God had asked us to do. And as I'm preaching this, and I was just like, what if we had moved here? It took us a year to actually come to North Dakota and really come to terms with what God was speaking to us. What if we had been here a year sooner? Where would we be today?
Yeah.
And I just almost got teary-eyed preaching this, and it wasn't in the notes. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, what would have happened if we could have been here a year sooner?
Yeah.
What could God have done? And so since then, it's like, speak, Lord, your servant's listening, and you spoke. All right, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, let's not, no strings attached. Like, let's go.
I have a theory that most people, when they're asking God about something or for a direction, they know the right thing to do.
Sure.
Like, you knew that something was stirring in you. And submitted people will eventually get to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this process in the middle of, like, they have to kill their flesh,
Oh man.
you know, where it's like, well, I think I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm gonna seek the Lord more. I'm gonna,
Mhm.
you know, it's like the like Gideon with his fleeces. Like,
Yep.
well, I'll put a fleece before the
Oh
Lord.
man.
Okay, here's another one, you know, and we go through this
yeah.
process that, like, kind of builds our faith. But I honestly think a lot of people know immediately or early on what God is calling them to do. It just takes them time to get the courage and the faith to actually do it. Or, like you're saying, they don't ever do it, you know, and they just live in
Yeah.
disobedience to it. So I think that's why I've just reaffirmed, like, I respect you guys, because it felt like immediate open hands, open heart. Here we go.
It almost takes just once disobedience or delayed disobedience. And then you're like, okay, like hindsight now that we're in North Dakota for 10 years, we're going, look at all that God has done. We've got 2 kids and we weren't ever supposed to have kids.
Yeah.
And we've lived this, full life in 10 years of, working here, then going to Garrison and planting the church and all these things. And it was like, man, what if we had not obeyed God? What would we be doing right now? And the hard part was, I was talking about this the other day with our family. There was like good things when we were leaving our hometown in Washington. There was good things and Christians saying, no, I really think God is telling you to do this. And we we're like, whose voice do we listen to right now? And one of them was to take over a construction company from our landlord, who we were great friends with and went to church with. And I respected dearly, and he wanted to retire. And he's like, I really don't think you should go to North Dakota, but I want you to stay and take over my company. And I was like, and then my wife reminded me of one the other day that we were supposed to go to Mexico with her family that are missionaries down there with YWAM right now. And I was like, I don't remember that conversation at all. She's like, well, you made every excuse in the book not to go.
Yeah.
I'm like, but like, was that delayed obedience? But just all these things of like, God has a call in our life, and what do we listen to? And so it had took that moment of that first time wrestling with God for a year or so, and then, okay, Lord, we trust you with this. And since then, because we were so worried about my parents, and since then they've come to know the Lord and they serve Jesus and they love him. And I'm like, God, why didn't I trust you sooner?
Yeah.
And so it just took once for us of like, okay, no longer delayed disobedience. We're just going to be open hands. Like, God, you're calling us.
Yeah.
And a big part of learning through all of this is to not have those materialistic tie downs in life of just, God, where we never know when he's going to move and speak to us. And so we don't want to have those tie downs anymore. Like, it's just, I want to be free of things of this world, dying to flesh, to go wherever the Lord has called us to go. Because it's so much greater to serve him in whatever he has laid out before you.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
I know there's a lot of people that are listening that are discerning, what season they're in or what God is speaking to them to do. And I don't want you to be, to those listening, I don't want you to be afraid of being disobedient, because I think even of what you said about, man, what if we had come in a year earlier? Like, it's okay to have regret and to wonder, man, what could have happened, but it's also okay to understand that God in his grace still moves us the direction, that he wants us to go, and he can work around our failings, and the places where we miss the mark. I think what's really cool is, you're talking about taking over, leading a ministry that is built on retired people, which they need young blood, because if retired people aren't recruiting more retired people,
right,
then that organization isn't going to last, much longer. And so it's cool to see God put you guys in a position where you could bring fresh blood, into this really important ministry. And I think there's a lot of churches that just need the help. Some of them can't afford to do the project. Our church has donated to smaller churches in our network because they couldn't afford something that was like, if we can't buy this, we can't continue to meet.
Right.
Right. Just like critical elements that, sure, for Evangel, we could cover that cost, but there's other churches that are in a different season of growth and a season of life than Evangel is, So I just think it's really cool. I think it's critical for our region, and I'm excited that you guys are the people to do it. In the last 35 years that it was formerly MAPS has been around, they've saved over $10 million for churches. Wow. In just volunteer work. That's amazing. Which I'm like, goodness, this program deserves some light, and to really get more people involved, because like, you get people involved, they find new giftings and new skills, even if it's painting a wall and you love it. Hey, you're working for the Lord, and people give their all when they're working for Jesus. Yeah. Any final words for people that are trying to discover or are wrestling with God's calling? Do it. Just do it. Just do it. You won't regret it, because God wants to do so much more in us and through us than we could ever imagine. Yeah. I never thought I would buy a trailer and live in it with my family and travel. Like, I thought we were raised that generation of get a job,
put into retirement. That's what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, God, I can't give this stuff up. And he's like, watch what I could do if you give it up. I'm like, okay, trusting. Is this going to mean I'm going to have to work after retirement? I don't know, but we're just going to trust God, like, and have the adventure of a lifetime through it all. And so, yeah, just do it.
It was
let
like,
go and let God.
Funny story, like a week after you called me, there's been so much happening at the church, and like,
Yeah.
the people that have had to move away, you know, that were like leaders in our church that we never expected we would lose. And there's just like this pruning that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so Janae and I, and really like our leadership team, our board, none of us are surprised by it.
Oh, man.
Because we've known all year this is what God is doing in us. Does it feel better knowing that? Not necessarily, but at least you know.
Yeah.
But I think a week after talking to you, this guy walks up to me. I'm getting ready to preach, and he literally goes, Pastor Josh. And I turn around and he walks up to me. He's maybe listening, so thanks for this. But he walks up to me and he goes, you want to hear a joke?
Oh.
I was like, I don't know. This could go a couple different directions. And he goes, tell God your plans.
Oh, my goodness.
And then he turned around and walked away. And I was like, that was odd.
And kind of
But
funny.
it's kind of true.
But it's mostly true.
It's like very true right now.
Yeah.
And so we're just like everybody else. We're just like, hey, Lord, what's next? And
Yeah.
I'm grateful for our church. And I just want to reassure, like, again, like we celebrate obedience.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, Evangel has a great pipeline of leadership and a lot of young leaders who are chomping at the bit, you know, and your obedience opens the door for somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
you know, whoever that person might be. And so we celebrate it. And I wanted to have you on the podcast because I wanted people to be able to hear the story, you know, of what God is doing. I wanted them to hear your example, not only of your guys' quick obedience, but also your calling to missions, because I think that is something the Lord is trying to do in our church.
Yeah.
And I think, man, to start with you guys as an example is huge, you know, and meaningful for people. So thanks for all of it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's a huge honor to be here.
Yeah.
I love you tons.
Love you too.
I love your wife and your family.
We love you
And
guys.
It's been amazing to just see what God has done in the last 10 years here and to see what he's going to do. Like,
Yeah.
It's God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, tell him your plans.
Yep. Ha.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys will have a mailing list and stuff
Yep.
when that time comes. And so
Yep.
people, you're so relational
Yeah.
as a person. And so there's going to be people that want to stay connected to you, and
Yeah.
they'll have that opportunity. That's the good thing about missionaries is they keep you updated because they want your support, but also because
Yeah.
what they're doing is important. So,
Exactly. YouTube. Thank you for that.
yeah. So we'll give people opportunity to follow you guys, but
Cool.
we're grateful for you.
Grateful to be here and all God has done.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the pod. Thank you all for listening, for joining the conversation. And there's more to come in this story, obviously.
Yeah.
We don't even know what the next 12 months looks like, but God's obviously leading it. And so we trust that. So
Completely.
if you appreciate this episode or you know somebody who would, then make sure you subscribe, share it with a friend. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on Highly Unlikely.